The rain came down in sheets so thick Violet Calloway could barely see the alley ahead, but she ran anyway because the screaming had stopped, and that meant someone was either dead or dying. Her sneakers splashed through puddles that reflected the neon glow of the city above, the towering glass buildings of Manhattan giving way to the forgotten underbelly where tourists never ventured. She shouldn't have been here either, but her photography professor had assigned a project on urban decay, and Violet had always been too curious for her own good. The camera bounced against her chest as she ran, expensive equipment her parents had bought for her 21st birthday last month, back when they still thought she'd become a corporate photographer instead of chasing shadows in dangerous places. The metallic scent hit her first. Blood. So much blood that even the rain couldn't wash it away fast enough. Violet skidded to a halt at the mouth of a narrow passage between two abandoned warehouses, her breath catching in her throat at the scene before her. Bodies. 3 of them twisted at unnatural angles, their throats torn open in ragged wounds that looked nothing like knife work. And beyond them, slumped against the brick wall in a spreading pool of crimson, sat a man who made every instinct in her body scream contradictory commands to both run and move closer. He was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. White hair fell past his shoulders in a blood-soaked curtain plastered to pale skin that seemed to glow even in the darkness. His features were sharp and aristocratic, all high cheekbones and a strong jaw, but it was his eyes that trapped her. Crimson eyes that fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously like prey and something infinitely more precious. "Leave," he said, and his voice was cultured, accented with something old European that she couldn't quite place. "You should not have seen this." But Violet was already moving forward, her nurse's training from her first 2 years of college before she'd switched to photography overriding her common sense. Because beneath all that ethereal beauty, she could see he was injured, badly. A wooden stake protruded from his left shoulder, and another wound in his side leaked blood with every shallow breath he took. "You're hurt," she said, kneeling beside him and ignoring how his entire body tensed. Up close, she could see his pupils were dilated with pain, and his skin was cold enough that she could feel it through the rain. "I said leave." His hand shot out, faster than she could track, gripping her wrist with strength that should have been impossible for someone losing this much blood. "I'm not what you think I am, girl. I am dangerous." Violet met those crimson eyes steadily, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "I can see 3 dead bodies that prove you're dangerous. I can also see you're bleeding out. So either kill me or let me help you. But decide quickly because you're going into shock." Something flickered across his perfect features. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity. His grip loosened slightly, though he didn't release her. "You do not fear me." "I'm terrified," she admitted. "But someone tried to kill you, and whoever did this might come back to finish the job. So we're both in danger if we stay here." He studied her for a long moment, and Violet had the distinct impression she was being evaluated in ways she couldn't begin to understand. Then he laughed, a low sound that turned into a grimace of pain. "You are either very brave or very foolish, little mortal. My enemies are not your concern." "Mortal?" The word registered oddly. "What are you?" His smile revealed elongated canines that gleamed wickedly in the dim light. "Can you truly not guess?" "Vampire." The word screamed through her mind, impossible and insane, and yet somehow the only explanation that made sense. The pale skin, the red eyes, the inhuman speed and strength, the savagery of the deaths around them. Violet's hands trembled as she reached for the torn fabric of her sleeve, but she didn't pull away. "That's not possible," she whispered. "And yet," he gestured weakly at himself with his free hand, "here I am, dying in an alley while a human girl debates whether I am worth saving. The irony is not lost on me." "Will you hurt me if I help you?" The question hung between them, loaded with more weight than seemed reasonable. His crimson gaze softened slightly, something almost like respect flickering in their depths. "No, you have my word, for what little that may mean to you. I am Ravian Ashcroft, and I swear on my name and title that you will come to no harm from me this night." Titles. Of course he had a title. Violet filed that information away and focused on the immediate problem. She couldn't remove the stake without risking him bleeding out completely, but she could at least bind the wound in his side. Her fingers worked quickly, tearing her sleeve completely off and wadding it against the puncture wound. "Press here," she instructed, guiding his hand to hold the makeshift bandage. His fingers were long and elegant, she noticed distantly, like a pianist's. "Keep pressure on it. The stake in your shoulder, I can't remove it safely, not here. Do you have somewhere you can go? Someone who can help you properly?" Ravian's laugh was bitter this time. "The ones who should help me are the ones who arranged this ambush. A coup, neatly executed. They waited until I was separated from my guard, used silver-coated blades to slow my healing, and ensured I would die slowly enough to make a statement." "Who are they?" "The Council of Elders, old families who believe my reforms threaten their power." He leaned his head back against the wall, his white hair now thoroughly soaked with rain and blood. "They are not wrong. I would have stripped them of their stranglehold on our kind, brought us into this modern age instead of clinging to the old ways, but it seems they moved first. Our kind. Vampires. This was insane. This entire situation was completely insane, and yet Violet found herself believing every word. Maybe it was the evidence of the impossible sitting right in front of her. Maybe it was something in his voice, ancient and tired and sincere. Maybe she'd already lost her mind. "Then you need to get somewhere they won't find you," she said firmly. "My apartment is 20 minutes from here by subway. It's not much, but it's safe. No one knows me there except my neighbors, and they mind their own business." Ravian's eyes widened slightly. "You would take me to your home? You know nothing of me except that I'm a killer. You're someone who needs help." Violet stood, extending her hand to him. "And I'm someone who doesn't know how to walk away from that. So are you coming, or are you going to sit here and let your enemies win?" For a moment, she thought he might refuse. His pride was evident in every line of his aristocratic face, the idea of accepting help from a mortal clearly warring with his survival instinct. Then he reached up and took her hand, and Violet felt the full weight of him as she helped pull him to his feet. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, and even injured, he moved with a dangerous grace that made her think of apex predators. The stake in his shoulder had to be agony, but beyond a slight tightening around his eyes, he showed no sign of pain as they made their way out of the alley. "You will need to support me," Ravian said quietly. "The silver in my wounds prevents me from healing as I normally would. I am weaker than I should be." Violet wrapped her arm around his waist, feeling the unnatural chill of his body through his ruined shirt. "How weak are we talking? Because if you're going to collapse, I need to know now." "I will not collapse." His voice held absolute certainty. "I am a king. I do not fall." A king. Of course he was. Violet would have laughed if the situation weren't so dire. Instead, she focused on navigating them through the maze of back streets toward the subway station, constantly checking over her shoulder for pursuit. The train ride was surreal. Late enough that only a handful of people occupied their car, and most were too absorbed in their phones to notice the pale man with blood-stained clothes and a wooden stake protruding from his shoulder. Or maybe they saw and simply chose to ignore it, as New Yorkers so often did with the strange and uncomfortable. Ravian sat rigidly beside her, his jaw clenched tight and his eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance. Violet kept her hand pressed against his side where the makeshift bandage was already soaking through, her mind racing with 1,000 questions she didn't dare ask in public. Her apartment was a 5th-floor walk-up in a building that had seen better decades. By the 3rd floor, Ravian's breathing had become noticeably labored, and by the 5th, he was leaning heavily against her despite his earlier assertion that he wouldn't fall. "Almost there," she murmured, fumbling with her keys. "Just a few more steps." The door swung open to reveal her modest studio apartment, barely 500 square feet of living space, dominated by photography equipment and half-finished projects. Violet guided Ravian to her bed, the only real furniture besides a desk and a single chair, and helped him sit. In the better light of her apartment, she could see the full extent of the damage. His clothes were shredded, revealing glimpses of pale skin marked with bruises that were already fading to yellow. The wounds themselves, however, remained stubbornly open and seeping. "The stake needs to come out," Ravian said, and his voice was strained now that they were alone. "But when you do, I will need blood immediately or I will not survive. The silver has weakened me too much." Violet's stomach dropped. "Blood? You mean Human blood. Yes. His crimson eyes met hers, and she saw the admission cost him something. I do not ask lightly. You have already done more than anyone could expect, risking yourself for a stranger. If you wish me to leave, I will understand. She should say yes. Should tell him to leave and never come back, should forget this entire impossible night and return to her normal life. But Violet looked at this beautiful, dangerous being who'd given her his word. She'd be safe, who clearly despised needing help but had accepted it anyway and found she couldn't turn him away. How much blood do you need? Not much. A pint, perhaps less. Enough to trigger my healing so I can purge the silver from my system. He paused, then added, It will not turn you. That requires an exchange. My blood for yours with intent. This would merely be feeding. Merely feeding. As if that were a completely normal sentence. Violet moved to her kitchen area and pulled out her first aid kit, along with a clean towel and a bottle of vodka. Not exactly surgical conditions, but it would have to do. Okay, she said, returning to his side. Tell me what to do. Ravian's expression shifted into something she couldn't quite read. You continue to surprise me, Violet Calloway. I heard your name on the identification in your pocket, he explained at her questioning look. Most humans would have fled by now, or called authorities, or attempted to destroy me, yet you offer your blood freely, asking nothing in return. I'm asking you not to die in my apartment, Violet said dryly, trying to mask her nervousness with humor. That seems like a reasonable return. Now walk me through this before I lose my nerve. The removal of the stake was brutal, despite Ravian's careful instructions. Violet had to brace herself against him and pull with all her strength, the wood scraping against bone as it came free. Ravian made no sound, but his hand fisted in her sheets hard enough to tear the fabric, and his eyes blazed bright red. Blood poured from the wound immediately, so dark it was nearly black. Violet pressed the clean towel against it, but Ravian caught her wrist. Now, he said, his voice rough with pain and something else. I need to feed now, or I will lose consciousness and my body will take what it needs instinctively. I would rather maintain control. Violet understood what he was offering. The choice, the control, making sure she was aware and willing rather than simply prey. She extended her other wrist to him, trying to keep her hand steady. Take what you need. Ravian pulled her wrist to his mouth almost reverently, his breath cool against her skin. This will hurt for a moment, then the pain will fade. My venom has properties that ease the feeding. Trust me? I'm here, aren't I? His fangs pierced her skin with a sharp sting that made her gasp, but he was right. Within seconds, the pain transformed into something else entirely. Warmth spread up her arm, pleasant and almost intoxicating, and she felt the pull as he drew blood from her vein in long, steady draws. Violet watched, fascinated and disturbed in equal measure, as color began to return to Ravian's face. The wound in his shoulder started to close, tissue knitting itself back together at a visible rate. Even his hair seemed to regain some luster, the white strands drying into silken waves that framed his perfect features. When he finally pulled back, his crimson eyes were brighter, more alert, and fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. A drop of her blood stained his lower lip, and he licked it away slowly. Thank you, he said, and the simple words carried profound weight. You have saved the life of Ravian Ashcroft, Vampire King of the Eastern Territories. That is no small thing. Vampire King. Violet felt slightly dizzy, though whether from blood loss or the sheer impossibility of her situation, she couldn't say. She pressed gauze to the puncture wounds on her wrist and taped it down, her movements automatic. You're really a king, she said, like with a kingdom and subjects and everything. A kingdom that spans from Maine to Virginia, with approximately 15,000 vampires under my rule. I have held the throne for 3 centuries, since I was turned at age 28. Ravian stood, testing his newly healed body with careful movements. And now my court plots against me, believing me dead or soon to be. I have perhaps 24 hours before they move to install a new ruler, likely my cousin Seraphim, who has long coveted my throne. What will you do? Return to my court and remind them why I am king. His voice held steel now, and Violet could suddenly see the ruler beneath the refined exterior. There will be blood and consequences, but first I must recover my full strength and gather what allies remain loyal." He turned to face her fully, and Violet realized he was studying her again with that same assessing look from the alley. "You have placed yourself in considerable danger by helping me. If my enemies learn of your existence, they may seek to use you against me or simply eliminate you as a witness. I cannot allow that." "I can take care of myself," Violet said, lifting her chin. "Against human threats, perhaps? Against vampires?" Ravian shook his head. "You would be dead before you realized you were in danger. No, there's only one way to ensure your safety now." He crossed the small space between them in a single fluid step, suddenly close enough that she could feel the coolness radiating from his body, could see flecks of silver in his crimson irises. "I will claim you as mine, under vampire law that places you under my direct protection. Any who harm you would be committing an act of war against me personally." Violet's heart hammered. "Claimed? What does that mean exactly?" "It means you bear my mark and my scent. Other vampires will know at a glance that you are not to be touched. It is not turning, not binding, merely protection." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. "It is also permanent, unless I release you from it. You would be mine, Violet Calloway, for as long as you live, which I intend to ensure is a very long time. And if I say no, then I will post guards outside your home and hope they are enough to keep you safe. But I think you are intelligent enough to understand that hope is a poor defense." His expression softened slightly. "I will not force this upon you. You have given me choice and agency when you had no obligation to do so. I offer you the same courtesy, though I admit I hope you will accept." Hope. This ancient vampire king hoped she would accept his protection. Violet thought about her boring life, her safe life, photographing urban decay and attending classes and going home to her empty apartment every night. She thought about the way Ravian had looked at her in that alley, like she was brave and foolish and worth something more than she'd ever imagined being. How does it work, the claiming? Relief flickered across his features, quickly masked. "A small mark here." He touched the left side of her neck, just above her collarbone. "I would need to bite you again, but not to feed. The venom itself creates the mark and carries my scent. It will feel similar to before, warmth and pressure, nothing more. Will it change me? No, you will remain entirely human. The mark merely serves as a warning to other vampires." He paused, then added with complete honesty, "It may also create a slight empathic link between us. You would be able to sense if I am near, feel echoes of strong emotions. Nothing invasive, but I will not lie about the effects." An empathic link to a vampire king. This was insane. All of this was completely insane. Violet took a deep breath and pulled her hair away from her neck, baring the left side. "Do it," she said. "Before I remember, I'm supposed to be a rational person who doesn't believe in vampires." Ravian's smile was small but genuine, transforming his face from merely beautiful to absolutely devastating. "Rational is overrated, little mortal, and you believed in vampires the moment you saw me. You simply had the courage to accept what others would deny." His arms slid around her waist, pulling her close against his body, and Violet felt the coolness of him seep through her clothes. One hand cradled the back of her head while the other supported her back, holding her with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the danger he represented. "This will be more intense than before," he murmured against her neck. "The venom for marking is concentrated. Stay still for me." The bite was swift and sharp, but he was right about the intensity. The warmth that flooded through her this time was almost overwhelming, radiating from the point of contact to every nerve ending in her body. Violet gasped, her hands fisting in Ravian's shirt as her knees went weak. She felt him at the mark site, not drinking, but doing something else. Something that made her skin tingle and burn in ways that weren't entirely unpleasant. The sensation built and built until she thought she might actually pass out from the overwhelming nature of it, and then it crested and began to fade, leaving her panting and dizzy. Ravian pulled back slowly, his tongue flicking out to seal the wound closed. When Violet could focus again, she saw his pupils were blown wide and his breathing was slightly unsteady. "Done," he said, his voice rougher than before. "You are marked now, mine to protect, mine to defend. Any vampire who sees you will know you belong to the king. Belong to the king. The words should have been alarming, possessive, but instead Violet felt oddly safe, protected, like she'd been wrapped in something stronger than steel and told the monsters couldn't reach her anymore. "I can feel you," she whispered, because it was true. There was a new awareness in the back of her mind, a presence that felt ancient and powerful and strangely comforting. "As I feel you." Ravian's hand came up to trace the mark he'd left, and Violet shivered at the contact. "Young and brave and burning so bright. You are extraordinary, Violet. I'm beginning to think fate put you in that alley tonight for reasons beyond simple chance. I don't believe in fate. Neither did I. Once." His thumb brushed across her lower lip, a gesture that felt far too intimate for people who'd met less than 2 hours ago. "I should go. My presence here puts you at risk, and I have much to arrange before I can return to court, but I will send protection to watch over you, trusted members of my personal guard who remained loyal." "When will I see you again?" The question slipped out before Violet could stop it, and she saw surprise flicker across his face, followed by something warmer. "Soon. I find myself reluctant to leave you, which is unusual for me. I am not known for my sentimental attachments. I bandaged you with my sleeve and let you drink my blood. I think we're past the point of casual attachment." Ravian laughed, a real laugh this time, rich and warm and completely unexpected. "Indeed. Very well, little mortal. When I have dealt with my treasonous court, I will return for you. We have much to discuss, you and I." He pressed something into her hand, and Violet looked down to see an antique ring, heavy silver, set with a black stone that seemed to absorb light. "Keep this. If you are ever in danger you cannot handle, press the stone and speak my name. I will come, regardless of where I am or what I am doing. You have my word." Then he was moving toward her window, opening it with ease despite the old frame that usually stuck. He paused on the sill, silhouetted against the city lights behind him, looking every inch the powerful, dangerous creature he was. "Thank you, Violet Calloway," he said softly, "for your courage and your kindness and your torn sleeve. I will not forget this debt." And then he was gone, dropping from her 5th-floor window into the night with impossible grace, leaving Violet alone with a mark on her neck, a ring in her hand, and the absolute certainty that her life would never be the same again. She moved to the window and looked out at the city, trying to spot any trace of him, but Ravian had disappeared completely. Only the strange awareness in her mind assured her he was real, that he existed somewhere out there in the darkness. Violet touched the mark on her neck, feeling the slight rays of puncture wounds beneath her fingertips. Already they were healing, faster than normal. She thought about vampire kings and court politics, and the fact that she'd just become entangled in a world she hadn't known existed until tonight. She should be terrified, should be calling someone, anyone, to tell them what had happened. But who would believe her? And more importantly, did she want anyone to interfere with what felt like the beginning of something impossible and dangerous and absolutely extraordinary? Violet closed the window and moved to her desk, pulling out her camera. She'd taken dozens of shots in the underbelly of the city tonight before stumbling across that alley, images of decay and shadows that had seemed so important just hours ago. Now they felt trivial, mundane, boring in comparison to crimson eyes and pale skin and the weight of a king's gratitude. She uploaded the photos anyway, going through her usual editing routine because she needed something normal to ground her. But her mind kept wandering to Ravian, to the way he'd held her so carefully while marking her, to the intelligence and unexpected humor in his ancient gaze. A vampire king. She had saved a vampire king and asked for nothing in return except that he not die in her apartment. And now she bore his mark and his protection and apparently some kind of empathic connection to him that let her feel his presence like a distant warmth in her consciousness. Violet touched the ring he'd given her, tracing the intricate metalwork. It was old, centuries old if she had to guess, and valuable beyond measure. The kind of thing that belonged in a museum, not the hands of a 21-year-old photography student from New Jersey. But he'd given it to her as a direct line, a way to call for him if she needed help. That level of trust, of commitment to her safety from someone she'd just met. It should have seemed excessive, but somehow it felt exactly right, like they had established something significant in that alley, a bond that transcended normal human interactions. The mark on her neck tingled, and through the strange new connection, Violet felt something that might have been satisfaction. Ravian was pleased about something, wherever he was. The sensation faded quickly, but it left her smiling despite everything. Sleep was impossible. Violet spent the rest of the night researching vampires online, sorting through myth and fiction to find kernels of what might be truth. Most of it was useless, Hollywood invention and folklore, but occasionally she found something that resonated, references to vampire courts and kings, mentions of old families and power structures, whispered stories about creatures that walked among humans, beautiful and dangerous and real. Dawn came with weak sunlight filtering through her window, and Violet felt a sudden spike of concern through the bond. Then it settled into what might have been contentment or relief, and she understood. Ravian had found somewhere safe to rest during daylight hours. He was okay. She finally allowed herself to sleep then, exhausted and overwhelmed and strangely happy. Her dreams were filled with crimson eyes and white hair, and the sensation of being held by something far stronger than she'd ever imagined, yet infinitely gentle. Violet woke in the early afternoon to find her apartment unchanged, no evidence that the night before had been anything other than a bizarre dream. Except for the torn sleeve on her shirt, the bandage on her wrist, and the mark on her neck that she could see clearly in her bathroom mirror. 2 perfect puncture wounds, surrounded by what looked almost like a tattoo. Delicate lines that could have been artistic or could have been veins, spreading outward in an intricate pattern that was actually quite beautiful. The mark of a vampire king, declaring her under his protection. Violet traced it carefully, marveling at the craftsmanship. Even in claiming her for practical purposes, Ravian had made it elegant, turning a warning into artwork. She wondered if all marks looked like this, or if he'd done something special for her. A knock on her door made her jump. Violet checked the peephole and found a woman standing in the hallway, tall and imposing with the same white hair and pale skin as Ravian. Another vampire, her instincts screamed, but this one felt different through the mark, not threatening, almost familiar. "Miss Calloway," the woman said, her voice carrying easily through the door. "I am Lysandra, captain of King Ravian's personal guard. He sent me to ensure your safety. May I enter?" King Ravian. The title sounded strange applied to the injured man she'd helped last night, but Violet supposed she needed to get used to it. She opened the door cautiously, staying ready to slam it closed again if necessary. Lysandra was striking, her features sharp and her crimson eyes assessing. She wore modern clothes, sleek black pants, and a leather jacket, but she moved with the same predatory grace as Ravian. Ancient and dangerous and completely focused on Violet. "You bear his mark," Lysandra said, and something like approval entered her expression. "Boldly placed and beautifully executed. The king honors you greatly, little human. I'm just someone who helped him when he was hurt. You are far more than that, or he would not have marked you." Lysandra stepped into the apartment when Violet moved aside, her gaze sweeping the small space with professional efficiency. "I have been in the king's service for 170 years. In that time, I have never seen him mark anyone. You must have made quite an impression." Violet closed the door, trying to process that information. "He said it was for my protection, because helping him put me in danger." "That is part of it, certainly. But marking creates a bond, Miss Calloway. The king is now tied to you in ways that go beyond simple protection. He will feel your distress, your fear, your pain. It makes him vulnerable." Lysandra's expression was thoughtful. Yet he chose to do so anyway, which tells me he sees value in you beyond the service you rendered him. The idea of being valuable to a vampire king was overwhelming. Violet moved to her kitchen area, needing to do something with her hands. "Would you like coffee? I realize vampires probably don't drink it, but I don't know what else to offer." "Coffee would be acceptable, thank you. We can consume human food and drink, though it provides no sustenance. It is more for social purposes." Lysandra sat in Violet's desk chair with elegant economy of movement. "The king wishes me to explain several things to you, as he was unable to do so last night given the circumstances." Violet started the coffee maker and leaned against the counter, listening intently. "First, You are now under the protection of the crown. Any vampire who harms you answers to the king personally, which is a death sentence. Most will avoid you entirely out of caution. Some may attempt to curry favor by offering you assistance. Accept nothing from them without consulting me or the king first. Okay, what else? Second, the mark will fade over time if not reinforced. It typically lasts 3 to 6 months before requiring renewal. The king will likely wish to renew it personally, as having another vampire maintain his mark would be considered an insult. Lysandra accepted the coffee cup Violet handed her with a nod of thanks. Third, and most importantly, you must tell no one about our kind. Exposure leads to panic, and panic leads to hunts. We have worked for centuries to exist peacefully alongside humanity. That peace is fragile. I understand. I won't tell anyone. Violet wrapped her hands around her own cup, seeking the warmth. Lysandra, what happened last night? Who tried to kill him? The vampire's expression darkened. A faction of the Council of Elders, ancient families who believed the king's reforms threatened their traditional power. They arranged for him to be ambushed by hunters armed with silver and blessed wood while he was conducting business in the city. His usual guard was drawn away by a false emergency, leaving him vulnerable. Hunters? Humans who know of our existence and have dedicated themselves to destroying us. Most are fanatics, but some are merely protecting their communities from rogue vampires who refuse to follow our laws. Lysandra sipped her coffee, her movements precise. The council hired human hunters to do their dirty work, ensuring no vampire blood would be directly on their hands. Cowardly, but effective. But Ravian survived. Because of you. Lysandra's crimson eyes fixed on Violet with uncomfortable intensity. You rendered aid to a being you had every reason to fear, asking nothing in return. That kind of selflessness is rare, Miss Calloway. The king values it greatly. Violet felt heat rise in her cheeks. I couldn't just leave him there to die. Anyone would have done the same. No, Lysandra said firmly. They would not have. Most humans would have run or tried to destroy him, believing him a monster. You saw past that to the person beneath. It is why the king has taken such an interest in you. Interest. The word made Violet's heart skip in ways she didn't want to examine too closely. When will he return? Soon. He's gathering evidence of the council's treachery and rallying his loyal supporters. There will be a reckoning. Lysandra stood, setting her empty cup on the desk. Until then, I will maintain watch over you. You will not see me unless necessary, but I will never be far. If you need anything, speak my name aloud and I will come. Like the ring he gave me. Yes. The king's ring is more powerful. A direct summons he will feel regardless of distance or circumstance, but I'm your first line of defense for smaller concerns. The vampire moved toward the door, then paused. Miss Calloway, a word of advice. The king is not human, and he does not think as humans do. His interest in you is genuine, but it comes with complications you may not have considered. Our world is dangerous, political, and often cruel. Be certain you wish to be part of it before you become more entangled than you already are. With that cryptic warning, Lysandra left, and Violet was alone again, with her thoughts and her coffee and the mark on her neck that declared her the property of a vampire king. The next 3 days passed in a strange state of suspended normalcy. Violet attended her classes, worked on her photography assignments, and tried to pretend her life hadn't been completely upended. The mark drew occasional glances from people on campus, but most assumed it was an elaborate tattoo or some kind of temporary decoration. She never saw Lysandra, but she felt the vampire's presence sometimes, a cold shadow at the edge of her awareness. It should have been creepy, being constantly watched, but instead, it made Violet feel safe, protected. Through the bond with Ravian, she caught occasional flashes of emotion. Anger, determination, satisfaction, and once a spike of what might have been fear that had her clutching his ring and nearly activating it before the feeling passed. He was fighting battles she couldn't see, dealing with threats she couldn't imagine, and yet he'd taken time to mark her and assign her protection. It made no sense and perfect sense simultaneously. On the 4th night, Violet was editing photos in her apartment when the temperature suddenly dropped. She looked up to find Ravian standing in the middle of her living space, having apparently materialized out of nowhere. He looked different than he had injured and desperate in the alley. Now, he was every inch the king Lysandra had described, dressed in black that somehow managed to look both modern and timeless, his white hair pulled back to reveal the sharp planes of his face. "You need to lock your window," he said, but his eyes were warm as they met hers. "I simply stepped through the glass. Any vampire could do the same." Violet's heart was racing, though whether from surprise or simply his presence she couldn't say. "I thought vampires had to be invited in." "A myth. We can enter any space not specifically warded against us." He moved closer, and Violet caught the scent of him, something cold and clean like snow. "How are you, little mortal? Has Lysandra been adequate protection?" "I haven't even seen her, which I assume means she's doing her job well." Violet stood, suddenly self-conscious about her worn sweats and oversized shirt. "You look better, healthier." "I have fed properly and rested. The wounds are completely healed." His hand came up to touch her neck, fingers tracing the mark with obvious satisfaction. "And you bear my claim beautifully. It suits you." The touch sent shivers down her spine, and through the bond, Violet felt an echo of what might have been desire, or possessiveness, or something in between that she didn't have words for. "What happened with your court?" she asked, trying to focus on practical matters instead of the way his proximity made her blood sing. Ravian's expression hardened. "I presented evidence of the council's treachery before the full assembly. 3 of the 5 elders were complicit in the assassination attempt. They have been stripped of their titles and imprisoned pending formal execution. The others swore renewed loyalty, though I do not trust them yet." "You're going to execute them?" "They tried to murder their king and throw our territory into chaos. The punishment for treason is death. It has always been so." He must have seen something in her face because his tone gentled slightly. "I do not make this decision lightly, Violet, but I cannot show mercy to those who would destroy the stability I have spent centuries building. Other vampires are watching. If I appear weak, more challenges will come." She understood the logic, even if the casual discussion of execution made her uncomfortable. "What about your cousin? The one you said would take the throne?" "Seraphim has fled the territory. He was not directly involved in the plot, but knew of it and did nothing. That makes him complicit." Ravian's smile was cold and predatory. "He will not get far. I have hunters of my own, and they are far more efficient than the ones the council hired." "So you're safe now?" "As safe as any ruler can be. There will always be threats, always someone who believes they could do better on the throne. But the immediate danger has passed." He cupped her face gently, tilting it up so she met his crimson gaze. "Which means I can focus on more pleasant matters, such as properly thanking the brave woman who saved my life." Violet's mouth went dry. "You already thanked me, with the mark and the protection. That was obligation. This is personal." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, the touch impossibly gentle for a creature capable of such violence. "I find myself thinking of you constantly, little mortal, wondering what you are doing, if you are safe, if you think of me in return. It is most unusual." "I think of you," Violet admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Through the bond I can feel you sometimes. It's strange, but not unwelcome. The bond goes both ways. I feel you as well, your curiosity and courage and remarkable lack of fear. You should be afraid of me, Violet. I am dangerous." "I know exactly how dangerous you are. I saw the bodies in that alley, remember?" She lifted her hand to cover his where it still cradled her face. "But I also saw you keep your word about not hurting me. I saw you give me choices when you could have just taken what you needed. That matters more." Something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability she hadn't expected. "You truly do not fear me." "I'm terrified of you," Violet corrected. "But I'm also drawn to you in ways I don't fully understand. The bond, I think, but also just who you are. You're not what I expected a vampire king to be." "What did you expect?" "Someone crueler, more arrogant. You're confident, yes, and clearly used to being obeyed, but you're also honorable and surprisingly kind. You made my mark beautiful when it could have just been functional. You sent Lysandra to protect me and gave me a direct line to call you. Those aren't the actions of a monster. Ravian pulled her closer until she could feel the chill of his body through her clothes. You see the best in me, Violet Calloway. It makes me want to be worthy of that vision. I think you already are. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like she'd imagined kissing a vampire would be. His lips were cool but soft, moving against hers with careful restraint that suggested he was holding back immense power. One hand tangled in her hair while the other splayed across her lower back, holding her securely against him. Violet melted into the kiss, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with less skill but equal enthusiasm. Through the bond, she felt his desire spike, sharp and intense, matched by her own racing pulse. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard despite Ravian's lack of need for air, he rested his forehead against hers. I should not want you this badly. You are human, fragile, temporary. I will outlive you by centuries. It is illogical to form attachments. Since when do feelings follow logic? Never. Which is why they are so dangerous. He pulled back slightly, his crimson eyes searching her face. I could give you forever, Violet, if you wished it. Turning is not easy and not without cost, but it is possible. You could live as I do, ageless and powerful. The offer hung between them, monumental and terrifying. Is that what you want? To turn me? I want you safe and with me. How that happens is your choice. His honesty was refreshing and overwhelming. But I will not lie and say I would not prefer it. The thought of watching you age and die while I remain unchanged is unbearable, and we have only known each other 4 days. Imagine how I will feel in a year or 10 if my feelings continue to grow as they have been. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone you just met. I know, which is why I offer, but do not insist. Ravian stepped back, giving her space. I did not come here to overwhelm you with declarations. I came to see that you were well and to discuss your continued protection. What about it? The immediate threat has passed, but you remain marked as mine. That will draw attention, both positive and negative. I would like to bring you to court, introduce you formally as someone under my protection. It would cement your safety and make clear to all vampires that you are not to be touched. Violet's mind raced. Meet more vampires, see the court, step fully into this impossible world. When? Tonight, if you are willing. There is a gathering, a celebration of the conspiracy's end and my continued rule. You would be my guest. He paused, then added with a slight upturn of his lips, I would very much like to show you off, if I am being honest. The human who saved a king. I don't have anything to wear to a vampire court celebration. That is easily remedied. I took the liberty of having appropriate attire sent to Lysandra earlier. She is waiting outside with it now, assuming you agreed to come. Of course he'd planned ahead. Violet found herself torn between exasperation and admiration at his confidence. You were very sure I'd say yes. I was hopeful. There is a difference. Ravian moved toward her window, that slight smile still playing at his lips. I will return in 2 hours. Lysandra will help you prepare and explain court protocols. Do not be nervous, little mortal. You have already won over the hardest critic, which is me. He was gone before she could respond, slipping out the window into the night with inhuman grace. Violet barely had time to process his departure before a knock sounded at her door. Lysandra entered carrying a garment bag and a small case, her expression amused. The king is quite taken with you. In all my years of service, I have never seen him so animated. He wants me to attend court tonight. Yes, and cause quite the stir in the process. A human guest of the king is unusual. A marked human guest is unprecedented. Lysandra laid the garment bag on the bed and unzipped it, revealing a dress that made Violet's breath catch. It was deep emerald green, the color rich and jewel-toned. The fabric looked like silk, cut in a style that was elegant without being overly revealing. Classical but modern, suitable for someone important, but not trying to outshine royalty. It's beautiful, Violet breathed. The king selected it himself. He has impeccable taste. Lysandra opened the smaller case, revealing jewelry that had to be worth more than Violet's entire education. He also wants you to wear these. They belong to his mother, apparently. A considerable honor. His mother's jewelry. Violet touched a delicate necklace, silver filigree set with emeralds that matched the dress. This is too much. It is exactly appropriate for someone the king is courting. Lysandra said it matter-of-factly, but her eyes were knowing. Make no mistake, Miss Calloway. King Ravian is courting you in the old way, with protection and gifts and public declarations. He intends to make you his in truth, not merely through a protective mark. We've known each other 4 days. He has lived for over 3 centuries. Time moves differently for us. 4 days is sufficient to recognize something extraordinary. Lysandra gestured to the bathroom. Now, let me help you prepare. There are protocols to discuss and techniques to learn. You will be surrounded by predators tonight, and while the king's protection is absolute, you must know how to conduct yourself. The next 2 hours were a crash course in vampire politics and social etiquette. Violet learned about hierarchy within the court, about old families and power structures, about the proper way to acknowledge different ranks. She learned that direct eye contact could be seen as challenge or invitation depending on context, that accepting food or drink from anyone but the king could create obligation, that vampire society operated on layers of subtle meaning that made human social interactions look simple by comparison. By the time Lysandra finished helping her dress and style her hair in an elegant updo that showed off Ravian's mark, Violet's head was spinning with information. "You look perfect," Lysandra declared, stepping back to assess her work. "Beautiful, but not trying too hard. The mark is visible, the jewelry declares the king's favor, and the dress is elegant without being presumptuous. You will do well tonight." Violet studied herself in the mirror and barely recognized the elegant woman staring back. The dress fit perfectly, hugging her curves in all the right places. The jewelry caught the light, drawing attention without being ostentatious, and the mark on her neck, which she'd initially seen as a brand, now looked like part of the ensemble, an artistic declaration of protection and possession. "I look like I belong in this world," she said softly. "Tonight, you do." Lysandra moved to the window as if sensing something. "The king arrives. Are you ready?" No, not even remotely, but Violet lifted her chin and nodded anyway, because courage wasn't the absence of fear but the choice to act despite it. Ravian entered through the window again, and the sight of him stole what little composure Violet had managed to gather. He wore formal attire that looked like it had been tailored specifically for him, all black with subtle silver threading that caught the light. His white hair was loose around his shoulders, and his crimson eyes blazed with approval as they traveled over her. "Extraordinary," he murmured, crossing the room to take her hands. "You will be the most beautiful woman in attendance tonight, and I will be the envy of every vampire present. You clean up pretty well yourself." His laugh was warm and genuine. "I have had 3 centuries to perfect my appearance for formal occasions. You have had 2 hours and still outshine me." He lifted one of her hands to press a cool kiss to her knuckles. "Are you ready to enter my world, Violet Calloway?" She thought about her normal life, her safe life, her boring, predictable existence. Then she looked at this impossible, dangerous, beautiful being who'd marked her as his and offered her forever. "Yes," Violet said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "I'm ready." The journey to the vampire court was surreal. Ravian summoned a car, a sleek black vehicle with tinted windows that waited at the curb as if he'd called it from thin air. Lysandra drove while Ravian sat in the back with Violet, his hand wrapped around hers in a gesture that felt both possessive and reassuring. "The court is located beneath the city," he explained as they drove through Manhattan streets. "We built it 200 years ago when New York was still young. It has expanded over time, a palace hidden in plain sight. Underground? Sunlight is our greatest weakness. Living beneath the earth ensures we control our environment completely." His thumb traced circles on her palm, a soothing gesture. "It is quite beautiful, I promise. We may live in darkness, but we are not barbarians." They descended into what looked like a parking garage, but Lysandra drove past the regular spaces to a gate that opened automatically. Beyond lay a tunnel that sloped downward, lit by torches that gave the space an anachronistic feel. "Electricity exists in the court," Ravian said, noting her expression, "but we maintain certain traditions. Fire has been our light source for millennia. Some things need not change." The tunnel opened into a massive cavern, and Violet gasped despite herself. The vampire court was magnificent, a sprawling complex of stone buildings that looked like they'd been carved directly from the cavern walls. Gothic architecture mixed with modern elements, all of it lit by thousands of torches and what might have been magical light sources that gave everything a soft golden glow. "Welcome to my kingdom," Ravian said softly. "Welcome home." Home. The word resonated strangely, but Violet didn't have time to analyze it. The car stopped before the largest building, a palace that would have looked at home in medieval Europe. Vampires in formal attire lined the steps, and every single one of them turned to watch as Ravian helped Violet from the vehicle. The weight of their attention was almost physical, hundreds of crimson eyes fixed on her, evaluating and judging. Violet felt her courage waver until Ravian's hand settled on her lower back, steady and grounding. "Stay close to me," he murmured. "You are safe, I promise." They ascended the steps together, Ravian's presence clearing a path through the gathered vampires. Violet heard whispers as they passed, words in languages she didn't recognize and modern English alike. The human who saved the king, marked by his own hand, wearing his mother's jewels. Bold of him to bring her here. The entrance hall was massive, all vaulted ceilings and intricate stonework. More vampires gathered here, all of them dressed in finery that ranged from classical formal wear to modern designer fashion. A sea of white hair and pale skin and crimson eyes, beautiful and dangerous and completely focused on her. Ravian led her to the center of the room, his hand never leaving her back. Then he raised his voice, and the entire assembly fell silent instantly. "My people," he said, and his voice carried with preternatural clarity. "Tonight we celebrate the failed conspiracy against our crown and the continued stability of our territory. But before the festivities begin, I wish to introduce someone important. This is Violet Calloway, the human who rendered aid when I was injured and asked for nothing in return. She bears my mark and my protection, and any who harm her will answer to me personally. She is to be treated with the respect due a guest of the crown." The silence was absolute. Violet felt every eye in the room on her, assessing and calculating. Then one vampire, an ancient-looking male with scars on his face, stepped forward and bowed deeply. "The king's guest is welcome," he said formally. "May you find safety and comfort within these halls, Miss Calloway." Others followed his lead, a wave of bows and murmured welcomes that felt both genuine and performative. Violet understood she was being evaluated, tested, and judged all at once. One wrong move could destroy whatever tentative acceptance Ravian had secured for her. She straightened her spine and met the assembly's collective gaze steadily. "Thank you for your welcome. I'm honored to be here." Ravian's approval flowed through the bond, warm and encouraging. He guided her through the crowd, introducing her to important figures with titles she immediately forgot. Lords and ladies, ancient families, vampires who'd lived longer than her country had existed, all of them polite, all of them curious, all of them clearly wondering what made her special enough to earn the king's favor. The celebration itself was overwhelming. Music played, though she never saw the musicians. Vampires danced with inhuman grace, their movements perfectly synchronized in ways humans could never achieve. Food and drink circulated, brought by servants who moved like shadows. Ravian kept her close, never more than touching distance away. He introduced her to his inner circle, vampires who'd served him for decades or centuries. They were more welcoming than the general assembly, clearly taking their cue from their king's obvious regard for her. "You are handling this remarkably well," one of them, a female vampire named Celestia, commented. "Most humans would be catatonic with fear by now." "I'm pretty good at pretending to be calm while internally panicking," Violet admitted, which made Celestia laugh. "I like her," Celestia declared to Ravian. "She's honest, so rare in court." "It is one of her many virtues." Ravian's hand settled on Violet's waist, pulling her against his side in a gesture that was clearly possessive. Along with her courage and kindness and remarkable lack of self-preservation. "Hey, my self-preservation is fine. I just prioritize helping people over it sometimes." "My point exactly." But his tone was affectionate, and through the bond, Violet felt genuine fondness. He was enjoying showing her off, she realized, proud to have her at his side. The evening wore on, and Violet found herself relaxing slightly. The vampires were strange and dangerous, but they were also individuals with personalities and histories. Some were formal and distant, others were surprisingly warm. A few attempted to flirt with her until Ravian's presence or a pointed look at her mark discouraged them. It was during a lull in the celebrations that trouble arrived. A vampire Violet hadn't seen before stepped into the hall, his bearing aristocratic and his expression cold. He had the same white hair and pale skin as the others, but his crimson eyes held something darker. "Cousin," Ravian said, his voice dropping several degrees. "How unexpected. I was under the impression you had fled my territory." Seraphim. Violet recognized the name from their earlier conversation, the cousin who'd known about the assassination plot and done nothing. "I reconsidered," Seraphim said smoothly. "Running implies guilt, and I have done nothing wrong. I simply chose not to interfere in council politics. Neutrality in the face of treason is itself treasonous. Then call the guards and have me arrested." Seraphim's gaze slid to Violet, and she felt the weight of his assessment. "But first, perhaps you could explain why you have brought a human pet to court. It seems beneath your dignity, cousin." The insult was deliberate and clear, and Violet felt Ravian tense beside her, his anger spiking through the bond. Around them, the gathered vampires went silent, waiting to see how their king would respond. "You will apologize," Ravian said, his voice deadly quiet, "or I will remove your tongue so you cannot offer further insult. I merely speak what everyone is thinking. A human in the court, wearing mother's jewels? Have you gone mad with whatever poison the hunters used on you?" Seraphim took a step closer, his contempt obvious. "She is nothing, Ravian, a momentary distraction. Surely you can see that." Violet had heard enough. She stepped forward before Ravian could respond, meeting Seraphim's crimson gaze directly. "I'm the nothing who saved your cousin's life when he was bleeding out in an alley. I'm the nothing he trusted enough to mark and bring before his court. And I'm the nothing who's standing here while you're whining about politics you were too cowardly to stop or support, so maybe reconsider who's actually beneath whose dignity." Seraphim's eyes widened, shock flickering across his features. Around them, several vampires made sounds that might have been amused or impressed. Even Ravian seemed momentarily stunned by her audacity. Then Seraphim's expression twisted into fury. He moved, vampire fast, his hand reaching for Violet's throat with clear intent to harm. But Ravian was faster, putting himself between them in a blur of motion. His hand caught Seraphim's wrist and twisted, and Violet heard bone snap. "You dare!" Ravian snarled, and his voice was nothing human anymore. "You dare threaten what is mine? She disrespected me. She spoke truth which you cannot tolerate, the same weakness that made you complicit in treason." Ravian shoved Seraphim backward, his strength sending the other vampire stumbling. "You are hereby banished from my territory. If you return, it will be considered an act of war, and I will end you personally. Now leave before I decide that even banishment is too merciful." Seraphim looked like he might argue, but something in Ravian's expression must have convinced him otherwise. He straightened, cradling his broken wrist, and bared his fangs in a gesture of pure hatred. "This is not over, cousin. Mark my words." "It is over when I say it is. Guards, escort him to the border. If he resists, you have permission to use force." Two massive vampires materialized from the crowd and took Seraphim by his arms, dragging him from the hall despite his protests. The silence that followed was deafening until finally, Celestia started to applaud. "Barr. Well done, Miss Calloway," she said, her tone delighted. "No one has put Seraphim in his place quite so efficiently in decades. You have made an enemy tonight, but also many friends." Violet's hands were shaking now that the confrontation was over. "I probably shouldn't have said all that. You defended yourself in your place here. It was exactly the right response." Ravian cupped her face gently, his earlier fury fading into concern. "Are you all right? He did not hurt you?" "I'm fine. You stopped him." She covered his hands with hers, grounding herself in the contact. "Thank you for protecting me." "Always. I will always protect you." He pressed his forehead to hers briefly, a gesture of intimacy that felt more significant surrounded by his court. "Come. I think you have had enough excitement for one evening. Let me show you somewhere quieter." He led her from the main hall down corridors lined with tapestries and artwork. Other vampires watched them pass but kept their distance, Ravian's protective stance making it clear he was not to be interrupted. They ascended stairs carved from stone and passed through a door into chambers that could only be his personal quarters. The space was surprisingly comfortable, mixing antique furniture with modern amenities. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes in a dozen languages. A massive bed dominated one corner, and Violet tried not to think too hard about that. Wide windows looked out over the underground cavern, showing the sprawling court below. "This is your home?" she asked, taking it all in. "One of them. I maintain several residences, but these chambers have been mine for 2 centuries. Ravian moved to a cabinet and poured dark liquid into crystal glasses. "Wine. Very old and very good. I thought you might need it after tonight's drama." Violet accepted the glass gratefully and took a sip. The wine was rich and complex, probably worth more than her monthly rent. "Your cousin really hates me. Seraphim hates anyone I show favor to. He has coveted my throne for decades, believing his bloodline makes him more suitable to rule." Ravian settled on a couch and pulled Violet down beside him. "His hatred is not personal. He simply sees you as another symbol of my poor judgment in his view." "Will he actually leave the territory?" "He has no choice. To disobey a direct order of banishment would unite every vampire in the territory against him. Even his allies would not support that level of insubordination." Ravian's arm draped across the back of the couch, his fingers playing with the loose strands of Violet's hair. "But you were right that his words are not over. He will scheme and plot and attempt to undermine me from afar. It is what he does. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to create more problems for you." "You created nothing. His treachery is his own." Ravian's hand cupped her face, tilting it toward him. "You were magnificent tonight, Violet, brave and bold and completely unafraid to defend yourself. My court will speak of this evening for years to come. I basically insulted a member of vampire royalty. You put an arrogant fool in his place. There is a difference." His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and Violet's breath caught. "You belong here, in my world. I have known it since the alley, but tonight confirmed it. You were meant to stand at my side." The intensity of his gaze made her dizzy, or maybe that was the wine, or the bond between them that pulsed with emotions too complex to name. "Ravian, I'm human. I don't understand all your politics and power plays. I'm just a photography student from New Jersey." "You are far more than that. You are brave and kind and see beauty in shadows. You are someone who helps injured strangers and asks nothing in return. You are the woman who challenged my cousin in front of the entire court and lived to tell the tale." He set aside his wineglass and pulled her fully into his lap, positioning her so she straddled him. "You are mine, Violet Calloway, if you will have me. Not just through a mark or obligation, but truly. I want you at my side, in my court, in my life. For how long? As long as you will stay. Forever, if you choose it. I can give you immortality, power, a place in a world you never knew existed." His hands settled on her waist, holding her securely. "Or if you wish to remain human, I will accept that as well. I will simply love you for as long as I have you, whether that is 50 years or 500. Love." He had said it so casually, as if it were obvious and expected. Violet's heart hammered against her ribs. "You love me. We've known each other 4 days. I have lived for 3 centuries. I know what I feel, and I feel it quickly or not at all." His crimson eyes were completely sincere. "I love your courage and your kindness. I love the way you see the world through your camera lens, finding beauty in decay. I love that you do not fear me despite having every reason to. I love you, Violet, in ways I did not think I was still capable of feeling." Tears pricked at her eyes, overwhelming and sudden. "I think I'm falling in love with you too, which is insane because you're a vampire king and I'm nobody special. You are everything special." He kissed her then, deep and claiming, his cool lips moving against hers with barely restrained passion. Through the bond, Violet felt the depth of his emotion, vast and ancient and completely focused on her. She kissed him back, pouring 4 days of confusion and fear and growing affection into the contact. Her hands tangled in his white hair, and his tightened on her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, turned hungry, and Violet felt heat pool in her stomach despite the coolness of his body. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ravian rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight. Here in my chambers. I want to wake with you beside me. Do you even sleep?" "During daylight hours, yes. A death-like state that is disturbing to witness but necessary for our survival." His smile was rueful. "I understand if you would rather not see it. Many humans find it unsettling." "I want to stay," Violet said firmly. "I want to be here when you wake up." The relief and joy that flooded through the bond made her own emotions echo in response. Ravian stood with her still in his arms, carrying her to his bed with inhuman ease. He set her down carefully and began removing her shoes with reverent attention. "I will not push for more than you wish to give," he said quietly, "but I would very much like to simply hold you while we sleep." Violet reached for him, pulling him down beside her on the massive bed. "I want that too." They lay together in the darkness, Ravian's arms wrapped around her protectively. Violet had never felt safer despite being surrounded by vampires in an underground palace. His presence through the bond was a constant comfort, warm and steady. "Tell me about your life," Ravian murmured against her hair. "Before the alley, I want to know everything about you." So Violet talked, telling him about her childhood in New Jersey, her decision to study photography, her dreams of capturing images that told stories. Ravian listened intently, asking questions and offering observations that revealed just how different their perspectives were. In turn, he shared pieces of his own history. Born in Romania in the early 1700s, turned at 28 by a vampire queen who'd seen potential in him, risen to power through a combination of strength and politics. 300 years of existence, of watching empires rise and fall, of adapting to a changing world while maintaining the traditions that defined his kind. "Do you ever regret it?" Violet asked, "being immortal?" "Sometimes. Watching everyone I cared about as a human age and die was difficult, but I have also witnessed wonders beyond imagining. I've seen humanity grow and change in remarkable ways, and now I have met you, which would not have been possible if I had remained mortal." His arms tightened around her. "So no, I do not regret it. Every moment of my existence has led me to this one, and I would not change it." Violet felt herself drifting as exhaustion finally caught up with her. The emotional roller coaster of the evening, combined with the wine and the warmth of Ravian's presence, pulled her toward sleep. "Rest," he whispered, his cool lips pressing to her temple. "I will watch over you, little mortal. You are safe here." She believed him completely. Violet let her eyes close and surrendered to sleep, cradled in the arms of a vampire king who loved her. She woke to find the chambers still dark, lit only by the artificial light filtering through the windows from the cavern beyond. Ravian was beside her, completely still in a way that made him look like a carved statue. His skin was even paler than usual, his chest unmoving, the death-like sleep he'd warned her about. Violet touched his face carefully, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. He didn't respond, didn't move. It should have been creepy, lying next to something that looked dead, but she only felt tenderness. This was part of what he was, the price of his immortality. She spent the hours while he slept exploring his chambers, careful not to disturb anything. The books revealed eclectic taste, everything from ancient philosophy to modern fiction. Photographs tucked into frames showed places she recognized and many she didn't, proof of his travels over centuries. There were also images of vampires she assumed were important to him. An elegant woman who might have been his mother, given the familiar features. Warriors in old-fashioned armor who were probably long dead. A younger Ravian with different hair and clothing styles, proof of his adaptation through the ages. Violet found herself wondering what her photograph would look like on his shelf. The human who saved him, the woman he claimed to love. Would she be another face in a long line of people who'd passed through his life and left it again? "You are thinking too loudly," Ravian's voice made her jump. He was sitting up in bed, looking more alert than anyone had a right to after waking. His crimson eyes fixed on her with amused affection. "I can feel your anxiety through the bond. I was looking at your photos, thinking about how many people you've known and lost. Ah, he rose and crossed to her, all fluid grace. You fear becoming another memory I mourn. Don't you? I'm going to age and die, Ravian. That's what humans do. And you'll still be here, looking exactly like this, watching centuries pass. He cupped her face gently. Which is why I offered you forever, the choice to turn, to become like me. I do not make that offer lightly, Violet. In 300 years, I have turned exactly 3 people, all of whom requested it after decades of consideration. But for you, I would do it now, today, if you wished. That's a huge decision. It is, which is why I do not pressure you for an answer. Take all the time you need, a year, 10 years, whatever you require to be certain. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Just know that the offer stands, and my feelings will not change whether you accept or decline. What if I say no? What if I choose to stay human? Then I will love you for however long I have you. 50 years would not be nearly enough, but I would cherish every moment, and when you passed, I would mourn you properly and keep your memory alive. His expression was completely sincere. You are not just another face in my history, Violet. You are the first person in centuries who has made me feel truly alive. That is not something I will ever take for granted. Violet pulled him down for a kiss, pouring her tangled emotions into it. He responded immediately, his arms wrapping around her and lifting her against him. The kiss deepened, turned heated, and Violet felt desire spike through both their ends of the bond. I need to get back to my apartment, she said reluctantly when they finally broke apart. I have classes tomorrow. Well, today. I've completely lost track of time down here. It is early afternoon. You slept longer than I expected. Ravian pressed one more kiss to her forehead before releasing her. Lysandra will drive you home, but Violet, I do not want this to be goodbye. May I see you again soon? You'd better. You have my phone number through some mysterious vampire means, I assume. His smile was sheepish. I may have had Lysandra acquire it from your identification. Forgive the invasion of privacy. I'll allow it this time. She gathered her things, now feeling slightly awkward in the formal dress. Ravian noticed and produced a comfortable-looking outfit from his wardrobe, modern clothes that were probably designer but looked casual enough. For the journey home, I thought you might prefer something more practical. The consideration made her heart warm. Violet changed quickly while Ravian politely turned his back, then let him walk her through the palace to where Lysandra waited with the car. The vampire captain raised an eyebrow at Violet's appearance but said nothing beyond, "Interesting evening?" That's one word for it, Violet agreed. Ravian kissed her once more before she got in the car, a lingering contact that promised more to come. I will call you tonight. Sleep well, little mortal. Dream of me. Arrogant vampire, she teased, but she knew she would absolutely dream of him. The drive back to her apartment felt surreal. Returning to the mundane world after spending a night in an underground palace, Lysandra was quiet for most of the journey, then finally spoke as they neared Violet's building. The king has never brought a human to court before. Your presence last night changed something fundamental in our world. Be prepared for attention from vampires who will either seek your favor or wish you removed, and be warned that Seraphim will not simply accept his banishment. He is proud and vengeful, a dangerous combination. Are you trying to scare me? I'm trying to prepare you. You have entered a world of immortal politics and ancient grudges. Mistakes can be fatal, and the king cannot always protect you, no matter how much he wishes to. Lysandra pulled up to the curb. But I have also seen the way he looks at you, and I have served him long enough to recognize when he has found something precious. So I offer you this advice freely. Stay close to those of us who are loyal to the crown, trust your instincts, and never forget that you are stronger than you know. You stood up to Seraphim in front of the entire court. That takes remarkable courage. Or remarkable stupidity, this Violet muttered, but she was smiling. The line between the two is thinner than most believe. Lysandra's expression softened slightly. Welcome to the king's inner circle, Miss Calloway. We will do our utmost to keep you safe. Violet returned to her apartment to find everything exactly as she'd left it, normal and mundane, and suddenly feeling far too small. She'd spent the night in a vampire palace, sleeping in the arms of an ancient king, and now she was supposed to just go to class and edit photographs like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. She could feel Ravian through the bond, distant but present, a constant reminder that she was no longer simply human Violet Calloway. She was marked, claimed, part of a world she'd never known existed. Her phone rang that evening while she was editing photos, and Ravian's name appeared on the screen. She answered immediately, her heart racing. "Hello, little mortal," his cultured voice came through, warm and intimate. "I find myself missing you already. Is that foolish for an ancient vampire?" "It's sweet," Violet said, curling up on her bed with the phone pressed to her ear. "I miss you too. My apartment feels empty now. Say the word and I will be there in minutes." She almost took him up on it, but forced herself to be practical. "I have class tomorrow morning. I need to sleep and pretend to be a normal student for a few hours. Then I will let you rest." "But Violet, I meant what I said last night. I love you, and I want you in my life. Whatever form that takes, however you wish it to happen, I am committed to making this work. Even though I'm human and temporary. Especially because of that, every moment with you is precious precisely because I know how fragile mortal life can be." His voice dropped lower. "Though I hope you will consider my offer of forever. I am finding it increasingly difficult to imagine my existence without you in it." They talked for another hour, about nothing and everything. Violet told him about her photography assignments, and he shared stories from his centuries of existence. The conversation flowed easily, comfortably, like they'd known each other far longer than a handful of days. When they finally said goodnight, Violet felt the bond between them pulse with affection and contentment. She fell asleep with her hand pressed to the mark on her neck, feeling connected to something vast and ancient and impossibly wonderful. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Violet attended classes during the day, maintained her normal human life as best she could, but her evenings belonged to Ravian. He visited her apartment regularly, sometimes staying through the daylight hours sleeping in her bed. Other times, he brought her back to the underground court, introducing her to more of his world. She met his inner circle properly, learned the complex politics that governed vampire society, and slowly began to understand the weight of responsibility Ravian carried as king. He wasn't just a figurehead. He was lawmaker, judge, and ultimate authority for thousands of vampires across the Eastern Territories. Every decision he made affected lives that spanned centuries. And somehow, impossibly, he decided she was worth his attention and affection. "You are thinking too loudly again," Ravian said one evening as they sat together in his chambers. Violet had been staring at a book without actually reading it, her mind churning with thoughts. "I'm thinking about us, about how this actually works long term." She set the book aside and turned to face him. "You're immortal. I'm not. Eventually, I'm going to age while you stay the same. How do we handle that?" "By making a choice." Ravian's expression was serious. "You have been part of my world for 3 weeks now. You understand what being a vampire means, the benefits and the costs. I believe you have enough information to make an informed decision about turning, if that is something you wish to consider." Violet's heart hammered. "You want me to decide now?" "I want you to decide when you are ready. But I also want you to know that I am ready. If you said yes tonight, I would turn you with joy and gratitude. If you need more time, I will wait. If you ultimately decide to remain human, I will accept that and love you anyway." He took her hands, his cool fingers wrapping around hers. "The choice is entirely yours, Violet. No pressure, no expectations. Just honest possibilities. What's it like? Turning. Painful, if I am being honest. My venom will burn through your system, killing your mortal body and remaking it. 3 days of agony, though I would stay with you every moment, and then you would wake immortal, with all the strengths and weaknesses of our kind." His crimson gaze held hers steadily. "You would need to feed on blood to survive. You could never again walk in daylight without pain. You would watch any human family you have age and die while you remain unchanged. These are significant sacrifices. But I would have forever, with you. Yes, forever with me, with my people, with all the wonders and dangers of immortal existence." He lifted her hands to press kisses to her knuckles. "I will not pretend it is an easy choice. Both paths have merit, but know that whichever you select, I will be at your side. Violet thought about her life before the alley. Her safe, predictable existence with its small dreams and comfortable boundaries. She thought about her parents, who she spoke to once a week and saw twice a year. Her friends from school, pleasant, but not particularly close. Her photography, which she loved, but didn't define her. Then she thought about Ravian, about the way he looked at her like she was precious, about the underground court that had begun to feel familiar, about Lysandra and Celestia and the other vampires who'd cautiously welcomed her into their world, about the possibility of forever, of never having to say goodbye, of building something extraordinary. I want to do it, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I want you to turn me. Ravian's eyes widened, surprise and joy flooding through the bond. Are you certain? This cannot be undone, Violet. Once you are turned, there is no returning to humanity. I'm certain. I've spent 3 weeks watching your world, learning your ways. I've seen the darkness and the beauty, and I've realized that I don't want to go back to my old life. I want this. I want you. I want forever. He pulled her into his arms so quickly it stole her breath, holding her with a fierceness that would have been frightening if she didn't feel his joy through the bond. You honor me greatly. I will make you a queen, Violet, not just through title, but in truth. You will stand at my side as an equal, beloved and respected. I swear this to you. A queen. The idea was overwhelming and perfect. Violet pulled back enough to meet his gaze. When? Now, if you wish. Or we can wait, give you time to make arrangements with your human life, say goodbyes. The choice is yours. Violet thought about calling her parents, trying to explain why she was disappearing, thought about her classes and her apartment and all the mundane details of mortality. None of it felt important compared to this moment, this choice, this leap into something extraordinary. Now, she said firmly, let's do it now before I lose my nerve. Ravian kissed her deeply, pouring 3 weeks of restrained desire and ancient love into the contact. When he pulled back, his fangs were fully extended, sharp and deadly and somehow beautiful. Ah, lie down, he instructed gently, guiding her to his bed. The venom works fastest if injected directly into major blood vessels. I will bite here. He touched the mark on her neck, and here, his finger traced her inner wrist, and here, a touch over her heart. The pain will be intense, but I will hold you through it. You will not be alone, my love. I promise. Violet lay back, her breath coming faster as anticipation and fear warred in her chest. But through the bond, she felt Ravian's absolute certainty, his complete confidence in her choice. It steadied her, grounded her. I love you, she said, needing him to know before everything changed. And I love you. Forever, Violet. We have forever now. His fangs pierced her neck first, finding the mark he'd placed weeks ago. The venom burned immediately, hot and intense, spreading from the injection site through her veins. Violet gasped, her back arching, but Ravian's hand held her steady. The second bite at her wrist sent another wave of burning through her system. Her heart hammered, trying to fight the foreign substance invading her body. The third bite, directly over her heart, was the worst. Pain exploded through her chest and Violet cried out despite trying to be brave. I know, Ravian murmured, gathering her into his arms. I'm so sorry, my love. It will be over soon, and then you will be glorious. The pain intensified, and Violet felt her consciousness start to slip. Her last clear thought was that she'd made the right choice, that forever with Ravian was worth any amount of suffering. Then the agony dragged her under completely, and everything went dark. She floated in and out of awareness over what felt like years, but was probably only days. Sometimes she felt Ravian's cool presence beside her, his voice murmuring reassurances. Sometimes she heard other voices, Lysandra and Celestia and others she didn't recognize. Always the pain was there, burning through every nerve and fiber of her being. But gradually, the agony began to fade. Her heartbeat, which had been racing frantically, started to slow. Her breathing became shallower, less necessary. The burning in her veins transformed into something else, a cold power that spread through her system and made her feel suddenly impossibly strong. Violet opened her eyes to find the world completely different. Colors were sharper, more vivid. She could see individual dust motes floating in the air, could count the threads in the tapestry across the room. Her hearing had amplified to the point where she could detect heartbeats in distant parts of the palace, dozens of them, each one distinct. And the thirst. Oh, the thirst was overwhelming, a hunger that clawed at her throat and made her fangs ache. She sat up abruptly, the movement faster than she'd intended, and found Ravian sitting beside the bed with a glass of dark red liquid. "Blood," he said simply, "fresh and warm. Drink slowly. Your new body needs to adjust." Violet took the glass with hands that trembled, raising it to her lips. The first taste was transcendent, the blood coating her tongue with rich warmth that soothed the burning thirst. She drank greedily, needing more, but Ravian gently guided the glass down before she could finish. "Slowly," he repeated. "Too much too fast will make you ill. There's plenty more when you are ready." She met his gaze and gasped. His crimson eyes were even more beautiful now, layered with depths she could see clearly. Through the bond, which had grown stronger, she felt his overwhelming relief and joy. "It worked," she whispered, and her voice sounded different, richer, with strange harmonics. "I'm like you now. You are vampire, yes, newly turned and still adjusting, but vampire in truth." His hand cupped her face and she could feel every nuance of the touch, every callus and line of his palm. "Welcome to immortality, my love. Welcome to forever." Violet launched herself at him, knocking them both backward onto the bed in a tangle of limbs. Her new strength made the impact harder than she'd intended, but Ravian just laughed and rolled them over so he was pinned beneath her. "Careful. You are much stronger than you realize right now. It will take time to learn control." "Teach me," she demanded. "Teach me everything." So he did. Over the following weeks, Ravian personally oversaw her transformation from confused newborn to capable vampire. He taught her to control her strength, to move with proper grace, to hunt without killing. He introduced her to the complexities of vampire senses, helping her learn to filter the overwhelming input. Lysandra taught her to fight, insisting that a queen needed to be able to defend herself. Celestia coached her on court politics, on reading the subtle cues that governed vampire society. Others in Ravian's inner circle contributed their own expertise, welcoming her as one of their own now that she'd truly committed to their world. And through it all, Ravian was there. Patient, supportive, unfailingly gentle even when she made mistakes. He'd told her he would make her a queen, and he kept that promise. Not through grand gestures, but through daily dedication to her growth and happiness. 2 months after her turning, Ravian called the court to assembly. Violet stood at his side in the great hall, dressed in elegant formal wear, and feeling far more confident than she had at her first visit. The gathered vampires watched with interest as their king raised his hand for silence. "My people," Ravian said, his voice carrying with preternatural clarity. "When I was attacked and left for dead, I was saved by a human woman who asked for nothing in return. I marked her as mine, brought her to court, and offered her the choice of forever. She accepted, and you have all watched her grow into her new existence with grace and courage." He turned to Violet, taking her hand. "Tonight, I wish to formalize what has been true since the moment she tore her sleeve to bandage my wounds. Violet Calloway, you are my chosen partner, my equal, my love. If you will have me, I would make you my queen in truth and law. Will you accept this crown and all the responsibilities that come with it?" Violet's breath caught. She'd known this was coming, had felt it building through the bond, but hearing him actually ask in front of his entire court was overwhelming. Every vampire in the hall watched them, waiting for her response. She thought about the girl who'd run into an alley because someone was screaming, the photographer who'd seen a bleeding man and chosen to help despite every logical reason to flee. That girl had been brave and foolish and hopelessly idealistic. This woman, this vampire, was all of that and more. She'd been reborn in pain and blood, had learned to hunt and fight and navigate immortal politics. She'd found love in the most unexpected place and chosen forever without hesitation. "Yes," Violet said clearly, her voice carrying through the hall. "I accept. I will be your queen, your partner, your equal, for all the forevers we have." The court erupted in applause and cheers. Ravian pulled her close and kissed her thoroughly, unconcerned with their audience. Through the bond, Violet felt his absolute joy, his complete contentment, his ancient soul finally finding its match. When they finally broke apart, Celestia stepped forward bearing a crown, not ostentatious but elegant. Silver worked into delicate patterns, set with emeralds that matched the dress Violet had worn to her first court appearance. Ravian took the crown and placed it on her head with reverent care. "My queen," he said softly. "My love, my Violet." "My king," she replied just as softly. "My Ravian, my forever." The celebration that followed lasted until dawn, vampires raising glasses to toast their new queen. Violet accepted congratulations and well wishes with growing confidence, Ravian a steady presence at her side. She'd been welcomed into this world 3 months ago as a curiosity. Now she stood as royalty, equal in power and position. When they finally retreated to their chambers as the sun rose, Ravian pulled her close and buried his face in her hair. "Thank you," he murmured, "for saving me in that alley, for choosing this life, for accepting me, for everything." Violet turned in his arms and kissed him deeply. "Thank you for giving me forever, for showing me a world I never knew existed, for loving me when I was just a foolish human with a torn sleeve. You were never just anything. You have always been extraordinary." He swept her into his arms and carried her to their bed, laying her down with infinite gentleness. "And now you are mine in every way, my queen, my love, my equal partner in ruling this kingdom." They made love as dawn broke above ground, two immortal beings celebrating their union with passion and tenderness in equal measure. Through the bond, their emotions tangled and amplified, creating feedback loops of pleasure and love and absolute contentment. When they finally lay tangled together in satisfied exhaustion, Violet traced the planes of Ravian's face with wondering fingers. "I can't believe this is real, that I get to have this forever." "Believe it, my love. Forever is a very long time, and I intend to spend every moment of it showing you exactly how much you mean to me." He caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "We will face challenges, certainly. Rule is never easy, and there will be those who test us, but together we are unstoppable." "Together," Violet agreed, the word a promise and a vow. Forever. 6 months later, Violet stood on a balcony overlooking the underground court, watching vampires go about their evening routines. The society that had once seemed so alien now felt like home. These immortal beings with their ancient politics and complex relationships were her people now, her subjects, her responsibility. Ravian joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. "What are you thinking, my queen?" "That I'm happy. That I made the right choice." She covered his hands with hers, linking their fingers. "That I love our life together. As do I. Though I confess I've been considering how to make it even better." His voice held a teasing note that made her smile. "Oh? And how do you plan to do that?" "By asking if you would like to visit the European courts. Introduce you to vampire society beyond our territory. Show you the world through immortal eyes." He nuzzled her neck, his cool breath making her shiver pleasantly. "We could take a year, travel anywhere you wish, Paris, Rome, Tokyo, Sydney, wherever your photographer's heart desires." The idea was intoxicating. A year of travel with her vampire king, seeing wonders she'd only dreamed of. What about the territory? Who would rule in our absence? Lysandra and the council, now that we have appointed trustworthy members. They can manage for a year. His arms tightened around her. "I want to give you the world, Violet, every beautiful thing, every hidden wonder. You saved my life with nothing but a torn sleeve and your brave heart. Let me spend our forever showing you everything I have to offer in return." Violet turned in his arms and kissed him deeply, pouring her love and gratitude into the contact. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "Yes, let's see the world together. Let's have adventures and make memories and build a life that's worthy of this impossible love story." "Impossible," Ravian mused, his crimson eyes warm with affection. "Yes, I suppose we are rather impossible. An ancient vampire king and a human girl with a camera brought together by blood and courage and torn fabric. The best kind of impossible, Violet insisted, the kind that becomes real anyway. They stood together on the balcony, two immortal beings who'd found each other in an alley full of blood and death and somehow built a future full of love and hope. Below them, their kingdom thrived. Above them, the earth continued turning, carrying the human world they'd both left behind. But here, in this moment, they had everything they needed. Love and forever, and the absolute certainty that they would face whatever came next together. Violet had bandaged a bleeding vampire king with her torn sleeve and asked for nothing in return. In exchange, he'd given her immortality, a crown, and a love that would span eternity. It was the best trade she'd ever made, and as they stood together watching their kingdom, both of them knew without question that this was only the beginning. They had forever stretching out before them, infinite nights filled with possibility and passion and partnership. The vampire king and his human queen who'd chosen forever. Their story had started in blood and desperation, but it would continue in love and joy for as long as the world turned. And that, Violet thought as Ravian pulled her close and whispered promises of their future, was the only ending they needed. Forever, together, complete.